Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 4, Episode 20, which is officially Episode 95 of History's Greatest Idiots, the show where we look back through all of human history and bring you examples of catastrophic mistakes made by stupid people throughout the world and give you lessons that you can learn from those mistakes so you never repeat them again. But who are we kidding? We're humans. We like mistakes, especially when they teach us really interesting lessons like we're going to go through tonight. Joining me as ever is my amazing co-host and dear friend, Derek. Derek, how have you been, my man?
I've been really good. Really good. Yeah.
Derek, you're alive.
Hi, everybody. I've been good.
Moving. Yeah, you've been good. You've been moving into a new place.
Got a new setup behind me here. It's been good. I'm good. I'm happy to be back and ready to learn some new stuff and
I've also been good. Nothing major. I haven't been massively unwell, which is like the first time in several weeks that I've gone a week without being like, should we call an ambulance unwell?
Oof.
Yeah, I don't like those. I kind of I've had a really cool week. My wife has been away for the entire weekend, so I've just been kind of by myself for most of it. And when she came back, she was like super high on this thing, and I was like, "Hey, I've spent the day rediscovering bands from my youth. Have you ever heard of Primus?" And I was like, "Let me play you Tommy the Cat by Primus." Yeah, nice. She was, "Oh my god, this bass is amazing." And what was that? You can have my dad's intestines. He isn't really using them. I'll take them. To be honest, if you can spare his, if you can spare his entire digestive system, I'd gladly take that too. But yeah, I was playing my wife, and she was like, "Oh my god, this bass player is amazing." From Primus, I was like, "Yeah, he really is." And then I was like, "Let me show you a music video," and I showed her Winona's Big Brown Beaver. She was like, "This is horrible. This is terrifying. Why do they look like that? Turn it off. I'm going to have nightmares." So I introduced my wife to Primus, and she was like, "This sounds like the South Park theme." I was like, "Well spotted. They wrote the South Park theme."
There you go.
And then she watched Winona's Big Brown Beaver, the music video, and they're dressed as plastic cowboys in like that still holds up today. This music video is 30 years old, and it still looks hyper realistic now. And she was like, "This is nightmare fuel. This is fucking horrifying." So that's been my day. Has been freaking my wife out with MTV classic music videos like that.
Well, you got to show her the conspiracy that Les Claypool is an alien.
Yeah, and I think he might be. Especially as like, because he went. This is the thing I was finding out in my deep dive, that he went to school with Kirk Hammond from Metallica.
Okay,
the guitarist. And when Metallica's original bassist died, he auditioned for Metallica. Les Claypool.
That would have been weird.
Yeah, well, actually, they showed a documentary footage of James Hetfield, and he was like, "We had Les Claypool from Primus try out, and he was too good, so we didn't hire him." And then they cut back to Les Claypool, and he's like, "Yeah, they're just being polite. They thought I was too fucking weird." So it's like, yeah, that makes sense. You write albums about sailing seas of cheese and stuff like that. So yeah, it makes sense. But I rediscovered Primus, and I was like, oh. And then I rediscovered 9 Inch Nails and stuff, and watched a bunch of people react to Closer by 9 Inch Nails for the first time. Hey, I'm this person, and now I'm going to react to Closer by 9 Inch Nails. What the fuck is happening here?
Oh man,
yeah.
I guess it trips me out that people haven't experienced that or heard that stuff, having grown up with it in my face.
Yeah.
So I just don't even think about it. And
exactly. And like my wife was into it. She was like, "This is really weird." Like Primus, she was like, "This is really weird," but like the musicianship's amazing, and she's a bass player herself, and you know she loves all of that stuff. And then I showed her the video. She's like, "No, I don't want to watch this."
Well, how does she feel about Gwar?
I've never shown her Gwar. Rock music peaked in the 70s and 80s, but grunge rock pretty damn close to it. Yeah, I don't even know what category you could put Primus in, like funk metal, maybe.
Funk grunge?
Funk grunge, maybe, yeah. She's never seen Gwar. I would love to introduce her to Gwar. I think weird bands that, like, because if you imagine, like, Primus or Gwar, a band like that coming along now, there's no way they'd sell 2 or 3 million records like Primus. It's
no, like,
you know,
I think Psycho Stick was about the closest thing that came out after, and they were just kind of like a regional success.
That's right, yeah,
because they had a beer song. Everybody likes beer and tacos.
Exactly, and like you get rare, like, kind of cutting edge stuff. I guess a lot of people won't be super familiar with NoFX, but they kind of got a bit of mainstream kind of notoriety. And then you had like random people, like the guy who created a bunch of songs. There was a guy who was schizophrenic who wrote the song "Rock and Roll McDonald's," which was, like, honestly, look at this guy. He passed away a few years ago, but he wrote a bunch of really weird punk songs, and he had like a massive divot on his forehead. And people were like, "What's that about?" And he was like, "Oh, that's where I've been headbutting people." And they were like, "What?"
Oh.
And he was like, and it's not just like violently. He would like, that's how he would connect with his fans. He would like slightly headbutt them, and he was doing it continuously over like a 15-year period. So he had a massive divot in the middle of his forehead from where he was friendly headbutting people. So,
yes, he does.
Yes, it's quite disturbing to look at. But yeah, he passed away. But he wrote a song called "Rock and Roll McDonald's," which I think was used in Super Size Me. It was probably where it was most famous. Rock and Roll McDonald's. And it's just like, there's no musicianship to it at all. It's just pure like hardcore punk, nothing there whatsoever. But like that became famous, and like you just wouldn't get that, like that kind of stuff getting huge mainstream appeal unless it became a meme. Like Chocolate Rain or something like that, you know.
Yeah, that does still happen. Or Rebecca Black and Friday, and
where it's so deliberately
then it's just
bad.
funny.
Yeah, it's not like someone making like serious, super intense music that will last for years and years, like Primus did, who went on for like 15 years, and people weren't like, "Oh, this meme's run its course now." They're like, "No, we're just weird. That's it. That's our thing."
Primus was great.
I mean,
are they still playing?
I think they split up, but Les is still playing. Does a lot of concerts and stuff. He might be the greatest bass player that no one's ever heard of, really, because like not a lot of people hear about great bass players, maybe, except like Led Zeppelin and that. Flea, yeah. But like Paul McCartney, obviously, but like he's genuinely an incredible musician, and I'm introducing my wife to him. She was like, I've never heard bass playing like this in my entire life. It's amazing. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked because that was my day, was introducing my wife to Les Claypool. But I want to, while I'm here as well, I want to give a big shout out to our patrons. Dilly Bob, also Andrew Zavara, Kimberly Johnson, Jesse Christ, and Silent Crisis, all of whom are paying Patreons. If you would like to support us on Patreon, go over to patreon.com/History's Greatest Idiots, where you will get behind the scenes stuff from our life. You'll get scripts from the actual show itself. You'll get exclusive videos, which we'll be recording soon when I get back from my holiday, hopefully. And also random special gifts when you join, and also yearly gifts when you sign up, which reminds me, in the next couple of days, I need to give you a couple of addresses for you to send gifts to, yearly gifts. Yes, I need to do that. And all of that stuff. And if you want to follow us on Instagram, go to Instagram and search for @History's Greatest Idiots. You'll find us there. Also on YouTube @History's Greatest Idiots, where you can see all of our videos. We're up to 190 subscribers on YouTube now. Yeah. And the Adam West video is doing quite nicely. I was super happy about that. So
yeah,
that was a fun episode.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke.
Yeah. But no, it was really fun doing that. I knew it was going to be interesting because he had such a fascinating life and career and stuff. But the one I'm going to cover today and this episode, and it was one of those where I was like, again, I was torn between like two or three things, 2 or 3 people. One of the people I was considering covering was Mike Patton. I think I sent you a video the other day of Mike Patton singing All By Myself, but he changed the lyrics to Go Fuck Yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And he's got weird kind of corn style hairdo thing. I thought about covering Mike Patton, but like I couldn't find the specific stories of him and Faith No More arguing and fighting constantly. It made the stuff the Gallagher brothers took part in look like foreplay, basically. Like it was just, they were very intense. And also like I wanted to cover Mike Patton because he was notorious at slagging other people off when he didn't like them, like the Red Hot Chili Peppers and holding people to account. But also Faith No More, my favorite, most disgusting practical joke of all time. I don't know if I've ever spoken about this. You know, like rock and roll bands have this reputation of going into hotel rooms and trashing them and being fined like tens of thousands of dollars and throwing TVs out of windows and all the usual shit like that. Faith No More did, rock and roll. Faith No More did the exact opposite. They left the bedrooms like pristine. You would never know they were there. Like they would fold the sheets, they would like take the trash out, all of this stuff. They would leave the, you know, like when you put the towels in the bathtub because like they want to change the bath and like you just leave it there. They would, these people, the cleaners would come in the next day and they'd be like, oh my God, this is like, there's nothing's out of place. This is really wonderful. But most of the band had this routine where the one thing they do is they would take the top of the hairdryer and they just have a shit in the hairdryer and then put the lid back on. And you know, look, not everyone uses the hairdryer in a hotel, so it might be like a month or two before someone uses it. Then they turn on the hairdryer, point it at their head, and they get a hair full of steaming hot rock star shit. That was their thing. I was like, that is the cruelest thing I've ever heard in my life. And that was Faith No More's thing. They wouldn't desecrate the bedrooms, they wouldn't destroy, they wouldn't spray paint, they wouldn't go insane partying. They would just take the top off a hairdryer. I knew shit was somewhere in this story. Familiar Wilsons, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, so they take the top off the hairdryer and just leave a perfect turd in the hairdryer, put it back on, and then when it'd be there for a while, and someone would turn it on, and yeah.
Talk about a shitty hair day.
That's a terrible hair day. I think another one was that was very good. I like that one. There was also another one they used to do that if they were in fancy places, and you know where they have Lev hit us with the dirty Sanchez. Yes, I did, Toasty. You know, like when they have like fancy curtain rails, and you can take like the ends off them. They would take the ends off them and put like shrimp and seafood in there, and then put the thing back on so the room would stink, but no one could find where the smell was coming from, and it was the fucking curtain rail, which is like one of the last places you'd look, really. So like, really mean, disgusting practical jokes, but like nothing in a way that would damage the hotel. Wouldn't be out of pocket. They'd just have someone coming down to the front desk with a hair full of excrement. The
worst case of pink eye ever.
Worst case of pink eye ever. That's a nightmare hotel. Yeah, basically anywhere Faith No More were back in the day became a nightmare hotel. So I wanted to cover them, but then I found this story and I kind of fell in love with it because it's a really fascinating look back at how things used to be back in the day, and the way it reminds me a little bit of the Roy Kroc story. A lot of similarities to Roy Kroc and his interactions with the McDonald's people. And how credit can sometimes be stolen from other people. There's also a little bit of Stanley in here as well, who is he admitted that he'd like, if credit wasn't tied down, he would take it for himself. So let me tell you the disturbing history of the 20th century's most popular board game, possibly the most popular board game of all time. I mean, obviously, chess and checkers and Go and all of these things have been around for thousands of years. But in terms of popular family board games, I would say that this one is right up there. So let's get into it. Also, big credit to The Guardian for large portions of this script, which are taken from a 2015 article, which you can find online. I don't want to give the name away because it spoils a little bit. And also, to start this story off, we have to begin with one of the most influential women in history that very few people have ever heard of, certainly in terms of her impact with this specific invention. She didn't get any credit for it, and it had a huge influence on the world. So, Elizabeth J. Maggie Phillips was born in Macon, Illinois in 1866 to Mary Jane Nee Ritchie and James K. Maggie, a newspaper publisher and an abolitionist who accompanied Abraham Lincoln as he traveled around Illinois in the late 1850s, debating political things with Stephen Douglas. Kind of an interesting family she's born into right there. Like abolitionists, working with Lincoln. Fascinating kind of start to life, really. So
yeah, on the progressive side of things there.
Oh yeah, massively. After moving to the DC and Maryland area in the early 1880s, she worked as a stenographer and a typist at the Dead Letter Office, which it doesn't exist in this day and age, but back in the day, Dead Letter Office was an office specifically for mail that couldn't be delivered to its sender, whether it was because the fee hadn't been paid for the stamp or whatever, or because that person had left and moved addresses, and they would either please come in and pick up your mail and pay for it, or they'd have to do a little bit of detective work to find out where this person had moved to or if they passed away, so they could forward it. So it was like a whole office set up to handle this sort of mail, because obviously there's a lot of mail back in 1880. So
that seems like it would be a fun job, though. Like I would enjoy tracking it down, and
the kind of the Sherlock Holmes element of that job. Like I would be up for that 100%.
Would you have to track people down to send them those value coupons, though?
Oh yeah, like
who's this at current resident?
Yeah, exactly. Occupier or something like that. Like, oh, we better send them these coupons from Macy's or whatever. Yeah, no, they probably just bin that shit. But like, if it's a personal letter, then they have to track them down, because there could be money in there, like, so, or like a will or anything,
Well, you would want to send that certified, I'd imagine.
I would imagine so. Anyway, so
sorry, I've tangented.
No, it's cool. It's a fascinating thing. It's something that doesn't exist anymore. I'm sure there's departments within like mail companies that handle dead letters and stuff, but for there to be a specific office separate for that, I just love that. It's like a candle maker. Like every town had like a candlestick maker or whatever. So like, it's something that doesn't exist anymore. Go on.
Oh, I just said unfortunate.
Unfortunately, yeah, the world has changed. It's sad. Now we all have Apple stores. So she was also a short story and poetry writer, comedian, stage actress, feminist, and engineer. Multi-talented person.
That's a lot of stuff.
Maggie. A lot of stuff. She's super talented. At the age of 26, Maggie received a patent for her invention that made the typewriting process easier by allowing paper to go through the rollers quicker. So this is a really smart patent to have, because like if you have a massive patent, let's say someone patents the iPhone. I'm probably generalizing. This might not be how patents work, but like one company is going to use that. That's your patent. The company has patent to the iPhone. Whereas if you patent like, let's see, a touchscreen technology, then like all of a sudden a bunch of companies are going to have to use your patent and pay you to use your patent, right? So by creating a patent for typewriting rollers that make the process of feeding paper in much easier and quicker, then a bunch of other companies are going to have to use that patent because they want to be the quickest, most efficient typewriter on the market. So they have to use her patent. It's not just going to be one company. So that's really smart by her to patent something that everyone has to use in their, creation of these things. So,
oh yeah, for sure.
Really smart. She's just an amazing engineer. At the time, women were credited with less than 1% of all patents. mostly because a lot of the time their husbands would take credit for these patents, but she was unmarried and also an ardent feminist. She was like, no, this is mine. You're not having that shit. She also worked as a newspaper reporter for a brief time in the early 1900s. In 1910, at the age of 44, she finally married Albert Wallace Phillips. They had no children, partially because of their age and stuff, but she was unmarried and childless for like most of her young life, which was highly unusual at the time. Maggie was also an outspoken activist for the feminist movement and Georgism, which reflected her father's political beliefs when she was young. So Georgism, let me tell you about that. This is a really interesting thing. It refers to the economic perspective that instead of taxing income or other sources, so any other form of taxation shouldn't exist, to Georgists, they believe that the government should create a universal land tax based on the usefulness, size, and location of the land. So one single tax for land, no other taxes, just land tax. Then after funding the government, so once the funding has come through for their budget, the leftover money would be distributed to the people through like a series of councils that would then spend the money to improve like services and community projects and like the needs of the community, like building better roads and infrastructure and water and stuff like that. So essentially one tax for everything, and it gets distributed evenly. Many progressive political leaders at the time supported this economic perspective, and as it motivated people to cultivate land, redistribute wealth to people of low socioeconomic standing, so that they became richer, therefore the land became more valuable. And eradicate the idea that landowners or landlords held the power and monetary value of the land, and that citizens used and let people own all of the value and benefits of their creations. So you all work together, you raise the value of the land, and then that means the more of some type of communism, very similar to communism at this point, very early proto kind of American socialism in a way. It probably has its problems. Like I can see a bunch of issues with this straight away, but essentially what it does is it gets rid of landlords because they can't charge people for housing on this land because they don't own the land. It's like a parcel of land that is owned by the whole community, and the community has to pull together to raise the quality of the land, thereby meaning they get a bigger share of the leftover tax to spend on improving it and stuff like that. So
sounds super confusing.
Very confusing, but it was a big deal back in the early 1900s, and she was a big proponent of it because it meant that everyone was raised up, raising all ships instead of super rich landowners and landlords and people like that. Furthermore, she believed that women were as capable as men in inventing business and other professional areas, a view that was not held widely at this point in time by pretty much anyone in the United States, unfortunately. So,
well, wasn't it still at this point in time? It was like coverture still? Like they were property, basically.
They were still property, yeah. And women couldn't vote at this point. So that's crazy shit.
Look at her go.
Not that long ago. In the 1800s, the belief was considered novel and radical. And when she worked as a stenographer, she was making around $10 a week, which was not enough to support herself without the help of a husband. But that didn't stop her from pursuing like other side projects that made her a bit more money, so that she didn't basically have to get married until she was ready. In order to bring the struggles of women in the United States to the public's attention, she bought an advertisement and tried to auction herself off as a young American slave looking for a husband to own her. That's going to get people's attention. It was meant to show the position of women and black people in the country, emphasizing the fact that the only people that were truly free were white men. I'd add rich in there as well, because I think poor people of all, kind of races and sex, gender and all of that, I think they were held back if they weren't rich at this point in time. So
I think that's accurate. Yeah.
So the ad Maggie published became the talk of the town. It spread rapidly through the news and gossip columns around the country, and Maggie made a name for herself as an outspoken and proud feminist. She's got a point, really. That it is terrible for anyone that isn't rich. To Elizabeth Maggie, known to her friends as Lizzie, the problems of the new century were so vast, the income inequality so massive, and the monopolists so mighty that it seemed impossible that an unknown woman working as a stenographer stood a chance at easing society's ill. But she had to try. Night after night, after her work at the office was done, Lizzie sat in her home, drawing and redrawing, thinking and rethinking. She had begun work on a revolutionary new project. The descendant of Scottish immigrants, Lizzie had pale skin and a strong jawline and a strong work ethic. She was then unmarried, unusual for women of her age at the time. Even more unusual, however, was the fact that she was the head of her household, completely on her own, and had saved up and bought her own home along with several acres of property. She lived in Prince George's County, a Washington, D.C. neighborhood where the residents on her block included a dairyman, a peddler who identified himself as a huckster, a sailor, a carpenter, and a musician. It's kind of like Greenwich Village in the 50s. Like, kind of everyone moves there because it's like an inclusive community and it's super cheap, and
it's the happening place.
It is, and pretty much everyone's welcome. And there she is, Elizabeth Maggie. I'd imagine this is an early picture of her because she got married at 44. I'd imagine this is probably in her 20s or 30s, but it's a good picture.
Yeah, that's what I could find.
I know that hairstyle is now popular amongst young men in 2024 in this country. So she was a trendsetter 120 years before the fact.
There you go.
Yeah. Lizzie shared her house with a male actor who paid rent and a black female servant, as it's written here in The Guardian. She was also intensely political, teaching classes about her political beliefs in the evenings after work, as well as doing all of this like random stuff as well. But she wasn't reaching enough people with her individual classes. She needed a new medium, something more interactive and creative. And there was one obvious outlet. At the turn of the 20th century, board games were becoming increasingly commonplace in middle-class homes. In addition, more and more inventors were discovering that the games were not just a pastime, but also a means of communication. So Lizzie set to work. Now comes her most famous contribution to society. And I think, Derek, you have a picture there from the internet. And I think anyone listening or watching after the fact will probably see the shape of that looking slightly familiar.
Can almost make out some of it.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, you can see the wages, the bank part, public treasury, the structure of it. And then there's like a jail, I think.
Yeah, it looks like
coal taxes or something. It all looks super familiar if you know where we're going with this, and I think it's pretty obvious at this point. She began speaking in public about a new concept of hers, which she called the landlord's game. It is a practical demonstration of the present system of land grabbing with all its usual outcomes and consequences, she wrote in a political magazine. Kimberly, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And yes, you are correct. It is Monopoly, and we'll get to it in a minute. It might well have been called the game of life. She's quoted as saying here, which someone must have been paying attention to that as well. That's a different thing. That's made by Mormons. As it contains, there it is. Wow. Oh,
that one looks more like the landlord or like the game of life.
It does.
Layout.
Actually, yeah. Wow.
But
it's beautiful though. Look at the design of that. That's it's a combination of the game of life and Monopoly, basically. Like that's
super cool.
It's really good. I'd love to. I bet those go for an absolute fortune now. It might well be called the game of life, as it contains all the elements of success and failure in the real world, and the object is the same as the human race in general to have, i.e. the accumulation of wealth. Maggie first made the landlord's game popular among friends while living in Brentwood, Maryland. Lizzie's game featured play, money and deeds and properties that could be bought and sold. Players borrowed money either from the bank or from each other, and they had to pay taxes. that looks way better than Monopoly. It kind of does. And when I explain the game as well, you'll realize that her version is kind of superior in a couple of ways to Monopoly. So we'll get to that. I mean, we're talking about it now, paying taxes. And it featured a path that allowed players to circle the board, in contrast to the linear path design used by many games at the time. In one corner were the poorhouse and the public park, and across the board was the jail. Another corner contained an image of the globe and an homage to Lizzie's political hero, the economist Henry George, as in Georgism, whose ideas about putting the burden of taxation on wealthy landowners inspired the game. Labor upon Mother Earth produces wages. Also included on the board were 3 words that would endure for more than a century after Lizzie scrawled them there. Go to jail.
Aha.
There you go. And there's the globe in the bottom right-hand corner. You've got the jail, I think, in the bottom left. Public park. Yeah. Go to jail. Oh, man, it's so similar. And you got the prices down. Legacy, luxury. Oh, man. For rent. Yeah, you've got for rent, for sale. You've got the same prices as well. That's really, really interesting. Oh, man. It's so... I love it.
I like that globe in the corner. That's pretty cool.
That is really good. Lizzie drew 9 rectangular spaces along the edges of the board between each set of corners. In the center of each 9-space grouping was a railroad with spaces for rent on or sale on either side. Absolute necessity rectangles offered goods like bread and shelter, and franchise spaces offered services such as water and light. Sounding familiar now.
Mm-hmm.
As gamers made their way around the board, they performed labor and earned wages. Every time players passed the Mother Earth space, they were supposed to have performed so much labor upon Mother Earth that they received $100 in wages. Players who ran out of money were sent to the poorhouse. Players who trespassed on land were sent to jail, and the unfortunate individuals had to linger until serving out their time or paying a $50 fine. Serving out their time meant waiting until they threw a double. The rallying and chafing of the other players when one player finds themselves an inmate in jail, and the expression of mock sympathy and condolence when one is obliged to betake himself to the poorhouse make a large part of the fun and merriment of the game. And that still happens.
Yeah, the torture.
Like, oh, look at you. You've run out of money. That's part of the game. And she knew what people were going to be doing. They were going to be teasing each other when playing this game and being quite ruthless. But there's kind of more to it than that as well. Have you got another picture there of her with her board game? I think this is later in her life now.
With her playing with the Monopoly version of it.
Yeah, look at it side by side. Holy shit. That's hilarious, man. I like how this woman is like, yeah, come on. They're taking the piss now. Look at it. Also, she doesn't look... She looks like... I mean, we were talking about Winona's Big Brown Beaver, the people dressed in fake costumes for it. Does look... She doesn't look kind of quite normal in that picture, but yeah, I think that's just the photography at the time. But yeah, man, the similarities between Monopoly and her original version are shocking.
Oh,
yeah. And from its inception, the Landlord's game aimed to seize on the nature of human instinct to compete. And somewhat surprisingly, Lizzie created 2 sets of rules. This is where the difference comes in. Considering we are not currently playing the Landlord game, we are not currently tells me this doesn't go well for her. Yeah. So let me tell you about the 2 different rule sets that she created. So you could play it in 2 different ways, which again, like, makes the board game significantly more replayable because you've got 2 different game modes, basically.
It's like story mode and then like online play.
Yeah. Arcade version. So you got anti-monopolist set, in which all were rewarded with wealth when wealth was created. So the second wealth is created, everyone gets some money. And a monopolist set, in which the goal was to create monopolies and crush opponents, which is the one that we now know as the thing. So you could play the game as a team where you earn as much money as possible and everyone prospers. Or you can play it the other way and fuck everyone over.
Well, the more fun way, you mean?
The more fun way, where you are super competitive and evil and you become a mindless money-grabbing landlord. Her vision was an embrace of dualism and contained a contradiction within itself, a tension trying to be resolved between opposing philosophies. However, and of course, unbeknownst to Lizzie at the time, it was the monopolist rules that would later capture the public's imagination. In 1903, Maggie applied to the US Patent Office for patent on the board game. She was granted US Patent 748,626 on the 5th of January 1904. Maggie received her patent before women were legally allowed to vote in the United States. 6 years before that shit happened. Or was it 1911, or am I thinking of the UK? Or maybe it was later than that. Was it after the Second World War?
Man... I am terrible. I'm a terrible person to ask questions.
I thought it was 1911. Maybe it was 1920 or 1918 or something. I think
1919. Ratified in 1920.
Jeez, that's even worse. 17 years before women could vote, she had a patent on this like super popular board game. Anyway,
we like to be slow here.
We're taking our time with these things.
Really think things through.
Yeah, just like make sure, just keep them away from rights for a little bit longer. In 1906, she moved to Chicago. That year, she and fellow Georgists formed the Economic Game Company to self-publish her original edition of the Landlord's Game. In 1910, the Parker Brothers published her humorous card game Mock Trial. Then the Newby Game Company in Scotland patented the Landlord's Game as Brer Fox and Brer Rabbit. However, there was no proof that the game was actually protected by the British patent. So basically, they ripped it off and it didn't go anywhere, because who's going to buy a board game called Brer Fox and Brer Rabbit? Just call it what it is. She and her husband moved back to the East Coast of the US and patented a revised version of the game in 1924. Because her original patent expired in 1921. This is seen as her attempt to reassert control over her game, which was now being played at some college campuses where students made their own copies, would take it into economics classes, and it made its way into economics lectures.
Oh.
Yeah, lecturers and students alike would use it as a demonstration of how monopolies can be extremely dangerous for the betterment of society, and that actually the other way of playing it meant that everyone earned a good amount of money, but they weren't going bankrupt and being sent to the poorhouse and going to jail and stuff like that. So
it's strange. It's strange how you can turn on your friends so quick.
I know. And your family, fucking family. It's just like, are you sure you want to borrow that money from me? Because I'm going to put tax on it. So, oh my God. In 1932, her second edition of the Landlord's Game was published by the Ad Game Company of Washington, D.C. This version included both, so she'd renamed the games Monopoly and Prosperity, which is like smart. Like those are catchy names. I would play that game, Prosperity.
I would too. I want to try it out. I mean, can you play Monopoly that way?
I think
I need to know these other rules.
There are other rules. There's also another version of Monopoly that I'll get to in a bit that caused a massive lawsuit. And without that lawsuit, we probably wouldn't know a lot of this stuff now. So we'll get to that in a bit, and about like the erasure of history. Now it's time for the fucked up part of the story and the full-on antagonist of this story, because there's no other way of spinning this. This guy is a massive prick. Charles Brace Darrow was born on August 10th, 1889. There's little information out there about his life, and I'm not going to pay for his biography, but he worked as a domestic heater salesman from Georgetown, a neighborhood in Philadelphia. The part of Georgetown he lived in is now Mount Airy during the Great Depression. And I believe you have a picture of George Darrow later in his life. Yeah, that's definitely like further down the line after the Great Depression. But that's George Darrow.
He looks like a salesman.
He does. And again, I mentioned Roy Kroc earlier. Roy Kroc was like I think he was selling mixers for milkshakes at the time when he bumped into the McDonald's brothers, and he was like, we should franchise the shit out of this, and basically just ran them out of the business.
Anyway, it's during the Great Depression, after losing his job at a sales company following the stock market crash of 1929. Darrow worked at various odd jobs. He moved into a poor neighborhood where the community kind of cooked together and lived together and helped each other and stuff, and like would do each other's favors. Like one person would clean this person's house, and this other person would cut hair and look after the kids. And so there was all like a community thing because nobody had any money, and it was just the easiest way of getting by. Anyway, it was during this time that Darrow made a bunch of his acquaintances and his neighbors, and they started playing this game, the Landlord's Game, and in which the object was to buy and sell property. He decided to publish his own version of the game with the help of his first son, William, and his wife, Esther. Darrow marketed his version of the game simply under the name Monopoly.
Aha.
So he's gotten rid of prosperity. He's just doing Monopoly, and that's it. And we've got another picture of him here, also later in life. I mean, that's the classic Monopoly structure right there. Like, I doubt that has, other than the gimmicky ones that you can get and each different local town, that's the exact same board that most people will be familiar with. Yeah. So he's living in this shitty neighborhood. Everyone's down on their luck, but he's having a lot of fun playing this game with his neighbors, and he just decides to publish his own game. In truth, Darrow was just one of many people in the American Midwest and East Coast who had been playing a game of buying and trading prosperity. The game's direct ancestor was, of course, the Landlord's Game, created by Elizabeth Mackey. The game was used by college professors and their students, and another variant called The Fascinating Game of Finance, which was also a ripoff, was published in the Midwest in 1932. It was used at time to demonstrate the flaws and dangers of monopoly in society and finance. From there, the game traveled back east, where it had been remained popular in Pennsylvania and became popular with a group of Quakers in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Darrow was taught to play the game by Charles Todd, who had played in Atlantic City, where it had been customized with the city's streets and property names. So that's a trend that continues to this day with Monopoly. You can get I bought one of my friends for his 40th birthday a Birmingham Monopoly board game, and you can get it for every town in the world, and Harry Potter and Marvel and it's basically any franchise you can think of.
Well, you got to serve your niche.
Exactly. And I've got to tell you, the diversification of Monopoly has been one of its chief successes. You know, the board game with very specific place names on there and stuff, that's one version, but if you can localize it to a specific market with rules that everyone's familiar with, you are eventually going to make an absolute packet. The Darrow family initially made the game set on flexible round pieces of oilcloth instead of rigid square cartons, so that it was basically more accessible and easily storable. So it was tailored for people during the Great Depression to be able to play this game whenever, wherever, by pulling out this piece of cloth and playing it anywhere. Darrow drew the designs of the properties with drafting pens, and his son and wife filled in the spaces with colors and made the title deed cards and chance and community chest cards. On these early round boards, Darrow included some of the icons actually designed for him by a hired graphic artist whose name is unfortunately lost to history, that later Monopoly made famous, such as the large red arrow for Go, the black locomotive on the railroad spaces, and the faucet on the waterworks, and the light bulb on the electric company, as well as the question marks on the chance spaces. So all of those designed by a freelance graphic designer who probably got paid peanuts and got no residual royalty whatsoever to his designs. So,
hey, good work though.
It's good work if you can get it in the Depression. So, Darrow then secured a copyright for the game, interestingly, in 1933. The next known versions he produced had printed boards on oilcloth squares with hand-colored details. By 1934, Darrow started having the game printed on cardboard and sold copies in long white boxes to Wanamaker's department store in Philadelphia. Later that year, Darrow showed his game first to Milton Bradley, who rejected it initially, and then later to the Parker brothers, who, knowing what they know about the board game industry, should have smelled a rat, and they didn't care.
Because they already have a deal with her?
So they've published 2 of Elizabeth Mackey's games. So they are familiar with her. Those games that they published were not particularly big hits, but they were certainly familiar with her work. And the idea that they would have communicated with this woman and the Landlord's game, which she created and is now becoming really popular, independently published across the East Coast of the United States, them not talking about that is highly unlikely. But anyway, Darrow comes to them with the game. And they're like, "Oh, there's a brand new idea. Yes, we'll deal with you, Charles Darrow." Darrow reinvested money from the sales into smaller sets sold in black cardboard boxes with boards sold separately from the sets. After Darrow started to take orders from Philadelphia department stores, the Parker brothers reconsidered buying the game. So they saw that it was a huge success, and they were like, "We want a slice of that, and also we can build your distribution to the rest of the country." So
yeah, well, they wanted to see it worked first.
Yeah, and then they were going to invest in it, although it's been working well for 30 years at this point. So I don't know what they were waiting for. Maybe they were waiting for a man.
They were waiting to see if he got sued.
Yeah, exactly. That's what's happening. The Parker brothers negotiated the rights to produce the game in large scale from Darrow. Darrow saw and received US patent 2,026,082 on the game in 1935, which the Parker brothers acquired. Within a year, 20,000 sets of the game were being produced every week.
How did he get a patent if she already had a patent?
I don't think the patent office checks too well.
Okay.
Because obviously it's different offices, and he'd also, like, I guess the onus is on you to say that, oh, this is an iteration of this, or I've stolen this idea, but they ain't going to check. You know, they're not going to know each individual patent, especially as, like, the first patent was like 78,000. 780,000, and now we're into the 2 million range. So, like, it's a lot of time has passed at this point, but I'm pretty certain the Parker brothers knew. Everyone that was profiting from this game knew what was going on, except the person who's creating it. Anyway, within a year, like I say, 20,000 of these sets are being produced every single week. A Monopoly game became the best-selling board game in America that year, and it made Darrow the first millionaire game designer in human history. So
must be nice.
It's all right, isn't it? He is a millionaire within a year, and it's still 1936. So we're still talking Depression era finances and stuff, and he is now a literal millionaire, which translates to tens of millions today. So
that would be amazing. Just overnight success. Just
literal. Yeah.
It's off of somebody else's stuff.
Literally, he's stolen this idea. It's the Roy Kroc story all over again. Anyway, Parker brothers promoted Darrow as the sole inventor of the game, though later research has shown that Maggie, Jesse Railford, Ruth Hoskins, Louis and Ferdinand Thune, and Daniel Lehman, among others, were responsible for many or all of the game's significant elements collectively. So he stole elements from Maggie, and then a bunch of other people who designed stuff for him were stolen for his own version of the game. Darrow's contribution was the visual appearance of the game and the iconic cartoon-like illustrations on the corner spaces. He also standardized the number of houses and hotels, 32 and 12, although in its oilcloth version, it was 42 and 10. A posed photograph of and credited to Charles B. Darrow appear on the Parker Brothers Stock Exchange game Bulls and Bears, copyrighted in 1936. In this case, Darrow was used as a celebrity endorser, although he had not created the game. So he's an influencer who's attached his name to something that he had no creation with whatsoever.
Oh.
Again. So Charles Darrow, he's great at promoting himself, as are the Parker Brothers. They're like, this is our guy. He's going to be known throughout the world as the creator of Monopoly. And even though we know it's not true at all. Anyway, Elizabeth Mackey eventually catches wind of this. Because how could you not? You know,
I just wonder why they picked him. Is it just because he was good at promoting himself?
I think so. I think he's like a born kind of showman. He's got that salesman thing where he's really good at promoting stuff. And Elizabeth Maggie is like super intelligent, super capable, independent woman. And I think they were probably quite threatened by that at this point in time. And they thought that maybe the public would be. And also probably her politics probably scared them a little bit. Like, this is starting to sound like communism. And maybe we want to promote the American idea of crushing your opponents financially. And who better than this, like, middle-aged salesman who is telling the world he created this game from scratch, even though he's barely had anything to do with it.
Yeah, and we're in what, the 30s now?
30s, mid to late 30s now.
So yeah, the war's getting ready to kick off.
Yeah. So America needs some Americanism, and definitely not, wait, communism? They're our friends and allies, right? Oh, but kind of dangerous. Okay, yeah. So Elizabeth Maggie catches wind of all of this. She sees that it's becoming a huge success, and she's like, that's my fucking game. There's no doubt about it. So she spoke out against the Parker brothers and Charles Darrow in a 1936 interview in a Washington, D.C. newspaper in which she was critical of the Parker brothers. Maggie spoke to reporters about the similarities between Monopoly and the Landlord's Game. The article published spoke to the fact that Maggie spent more money making her game than she received in earnings, especially with the lack of credit she received after Monopoly was created. After the interviews and the outcry that kind of came about, Lizzie was paid by the Parker brothers. With the game taking off, the company bought up the rights to other related games to preserve its territory. So anything that was close to Monopoly, even if it came after Monopoly, they were buying it up so that they'd be like, oh, just get the fuck away. And like the kind of the local games that came before it that had elements of the Landlord's Game all were bought up. So for the patent to the Landlord's Game and the opportunity to work with Parker brothers to produce two other ideas that she'd come up with, Lizzie reportedly received $500 and zero royalties.
So
$500.
Charles he's a millionaire.
He's a millionaire.
$500. Shut up and go away.
$500. Shut up and come back with two ideas. And this is also on the proviso that the Parker brothers continue to give Darrow sole credit for inventing the game himself, even though they've acknowledged with the $500 that that's definitely not the case because they've just bought her patent.
Okay.
So I don't really know how they got away with that, but at this point she's like, I have to have some income from this. It's hugely popular, and I'm basically losing money hand over fist by creating this. So anyway, Maggie now has the opportunity to produce two games with the Parker brothers. She's like, well, maybe I can make money from that and strike up new deals. So she develops games including Bargain Day and Kingsmen in 1937 and a third version of the Landlord's Game in 1939. In Bargain Day, shoppers compete with each other in a department store, and in Kingsmen, it's an abstract strategy game. I couldn't find huge details on that, unfortunately. Both games had promise, but were deliberately under-publicized by the Parker brothers, barely sold any copies. They were buried, basically, because she was becoming a problem for them, and they'd signed this deal, and they just wanted her to go away. Basically, it was only after her death that the impact Maggie had on many aspects of American culture and life began to be appreciated. First and foremost, she helped to popularize the circular board game, which didn't really exist. It was like race to the finish. This could continue on and on and on for hours, and if anyone has played Monopoly with a competitive group of people, you will know that it can go on for a day if you play it carefully, you know?
Yeah. See, oh man, I was, when you said circular, I'm like, but it's square.
As in the kind of the eternal recurrence element of reincarnation and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a philosophical circle, I guess. So
I take things literally sometimes.
Yeah, that's okay. It makes sense, though. Her board game not only laid out the foundation and inspiration for Monopoly, the most famous board game in the United States, but also provided the entertainment that taught Georgist principles, the value in spreading wealth, and the harmfulness of monopolies. This aspect of the game was absent from the Darrow version of Monopoly because, again, communism is starting to loom on the horizon. She also contributed to the pressure for women's and people of color. Well, the Guardian really needs to stop using phrases. People of color's rights and women's rights through educating others about these concepts. Inventing board games at a time when women had less than 1% of US patents, and publishing political material in newspapers to speak out against oppression of women and minority communities in the United States was significantly frowned upon, and actually led to investigations for the most part when the FBI were like, better look into these people. J. Edgar Hoover would not have liked that. Charles Darrow, on the other hand, died on August 28th, 1967, at the age of 78 in his opulent mansion in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. The game Monopoly is his only real creation. And I say creation, he barely created any of it. He drew a couple of things, stole a bunch of designs and ideas, and that's his legacy. With that,
yeah.
We're not quite done, though, because something really interesting happens much later on. Elizabeth Maggie's legacy and contribution was quietly scrubbed from history deliberately by the Parker brothers once her 2 board game deal expired. And their narrative that Charles Darrow invented Monopoly continued until 1973, 6 years after Darrow's death, when Ralph Anspach, an economics professor at San Francisco State University, produced Anti-Monopoly, a game similar to Monopoly, for which Parker brothers immediately sued him. Like, not on our watch, motherfucker. During the 10-year lawsuit, they tried to bury this guy in legal fees, and he's like, no, I'll pay. I'll gladly take you to court. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals found that Darrow had directly copied the rules, including the misspelling of Marvin Gardens as Marvin Gardens, from the version Charles Todd had produced, which was a direct copy of Elizabeth Maggie's Landlord's game.
Oops.
Darrow, this had been buried for 40 years and then recovered because they tried to sue this guy for making basically a parody of Monopoly, and he was like, fine, I'll fucking ruin your names. So Darrow was still known as the inventor of Monopoly until Anspach continued his research and discovered Maggie's patents. Anspach discovered Darrow's decision to take credit for its invention despite having learned about it through friends and neighbors. Subsequently, Maggie's invention of the Landlord game was given much more attention and research. Today, Monopoly has been played, this is where it gets really weird, it's been played by over 500 million people worldwide. Same thing happened with Betty Boop. I think that I remember hearing that. She was invented and stolen, possibly, or the original design. And also, I've mentioned Roy Kroc, he did the same thing with McDonald's and screwed the original McDonald brothers, even building a McDonald's directly opposite their original restaurant.
Right.
And a friend of mine is convinced he designed a comic book character which now appears in Viz, and they just stole it from him. I can't even talk about it, but he basically sent it in to them, and they were like, oh yeah, nice design, kid. And then a week later, it appears in the fucking comic. Anyway, so we've got a picture here. Oh, that's Kingsman. Oh, yeah, cool! Look at that design. That's really cool.
And then this is what the board game actually looks like.
Oh, that looks really interesting.
Don't know what you do.
No, but it looks fun. I'd give that a shot. Also, I love that they're now featuring her on the front cover of the board game. What's her name? Elizabeth Maggie.
They got her right there.
Yeah, the creator of it, Kingsman. That's really interesting. Good that they're now featuring her likeness on these things. Anyway, so both the history and the play. Today, Monopoly has been played by over 500 million people worldwide. There are international championships, clubs, and ongoing games on the internet. Both the version and the history and play of Charles Darrow's version of the game testify to the power of the entrepreneurial spirit, but also miss out on the crucial point of Maggie's original creation, to demonstrate the economic ill effects of land monopolism and the use of land value tax as a remedy for it. Hasbro, the company of which Parker Brothers is now a subsidiary, still downplays Maggie's status, responding to a request for comment with a terse statement. Hasbro creates the official Monopoly game produced and played today to Charles Darrow, despite the fact we now know he stole the whole fucking thing. And even as recent as 2015, on Hasbro's own website, a timeline of the game's history begins in 1935, not 1903.
So, well, I want to know who came up with the little top hat and boot.
Yes, because that's the original creator. We know that's the most important one. Because also, when you play Monopoly, are you the top hat, or are you the boot, or are you the train?
The boot.
I'm usually the train or the car. I like the car.
I never can get the car.
Oh, the car's always gone. Yeah, that's super popular. That like sporty little number. Yeah, why wouldn't you? So let's see. Over the years, this carefully worded corporate retellings have been most illuminating in what they don't mention: Elizabeth Maggie, the Quakers, the dozens, if not hundreds of thousands of early players, Ralph Ansbach, and the anti-monopoly litigation. They leave all of that out of the history of Monopoly. And so the beloved Darrow legend lives on. It only makes sense. The Darrow myth is a nice, clean, well-structured example of the Eureka school of American industrial legend, the New Yorker's Calvin Trill wrote in 1978. This salesman suddenly has a great idea, and boom, he creates this amazing that works in a lot of people's minds, but the truth is never as simple as that, especially when it comes to business. Like, there's always the idea, a truly original idea in the world of business or even art. It's very difficult to cite truly unique ideas, creations, inventions, because everything influences everything else, and a lot of things are iterations on other things as well. So the difference here is this is actual theft. This is straight up theft. And the statement goes on: if Darrow invented the story rather than the game, he may still deserve to have a plaque on the Broadway, the Broadwalk, honoring his integrity. He now has a plaque there, even though it's inaccurate. It's hard not to wonder how many other unearthed histories are still out there, stories belonging to lost Elizabeth Maggies of the world, who quietly chip away at creating pieces of the world, their contributions so seamless that few of us ever stop to think about their origins. And that's the point, is it's this simple. Elizabeth Maggie created Monopoly, and this prick stole basically her idea, slightly changed the design, and then sold it and made millions and millions of dollars, and is now, for some reason, I don't know why they haven't changed this line of thinking, but he is still credited as the creator of Monopoly, and it's not true.
Well, it's that whole when the legend becomes fact, print the legend thing. It was just smoother, cleaner, and he was a guy.
Exactly. And also, I mean, we have to talk about, and it's still a problem now, attitudes in society towards powerful, influential, and incredibly talented women, and how that can intimidate a lot of people and find it a little bit scary. And also, you couple that with this woman's hope and desire for political change in a way that is more even and balanced for people that don't have anything. And all of a sudden, you have a perfect storm of like, we cannot touch this narrative. It will put people off, and we want to sell as much money. So we're going to have this smooth talking salesman be the figurehead of the game, to the point where he becomes an actual fucking influencer in the world of board games, so they can put his name on stuff. And it's disturbing that is, I mean, we know it's still a thing, but back then obviously it was significantly a thing, and I just think it's really sad, really.
Yeah, I need to play the other version of the game though to see if it's boring or if it's as fun. Can I taunt as we're all coming up together? I think I can figure it out. I can figure out a way to smack talk while we're playing it still.
I think, you know what? I think playing a version like that, and this isn't to say that everyone would find it boring, because I understand why people wouldn't want to play it. It does sound kind of boring compared to Monopoly. However, I feel like if you played it with kids, like really young kids, like, 5, 6, 7 years old, that's when that becomes an interesting game, because you are a group, you're a team, and you want to succeed, and you want the team to succeed, and everyone gets super happy, and everyone gets wealthy together, and everyone's raised up together. That's a great lesson for kids to learn, but it's also a great lesson about cooperation, about helping each other out and stuff. And that's the kind of thing you want to instill at that age. So
you would think, that's
instead of the other one.
I don't know. The things that I had instilled in me growing up, tell the truth, be a good person, help your neighbors, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Those were the good values, I thought.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I grew up, and my grandfather, who was, he was basically a communist. He was a Welsh socialist, and he was in the town council at the time. He was mayor and stuff, and he was always doing things like a family was being thrown out on the street because they couldn't pay their bills, and so he found it within a day. He found them a place to live. He paid for their rent and stuff, and made sure that they had money coming in. They had food and clothes and stuff, and that they got benefits immediately, so that they didn't have to worry and stuff. And later on, that guy, one of the kids from that family, became our family lawyer, because he was able to go to school and become a lawyer, and he's now got his own practice and stuff. And another guy, because my grandfather was also a teacher in mathematics at the time. He went on to be a lecturer. This kid finished school, and he had one qualification. He'd really fucked up in school, which was an O level in mathematics. That was his only qualification. So my grandfather made a bunch of calls and got him onto a really good university course, even though he only had this one O level. And he was like, listen, maths is now your life. You focus in on that, and you're going to be okay. And he set him up with the interview, and the guy got in. That guy went on to become the chairman of the London School of Economics. So when you raise all ships, people around you do better. It's that simple. And that's what she's at the heart of it. You can talk about the land tax thing and all that. Effectively, what she's trying to do is make sure that everyone is in a position to succeed, and there is much less inequality. Maybe not completely eradicated, but it's a lot lower than it is. And that's not a narrative that works for Monopoly, unfortunately.
Well, the lesson is still there in Monopoly. The lesson is still there to be learned, but we miss it most of the time
because we're being assholes, aren't we? Yes. We're trolling each other, and we're just like, "Oh, I'll buy that off you for $10. It's worth $100." Yes, but you need the money because you got to get around this section of the board, and if you land on one of my spaces, you're going to be bankrupt. And take the $10, and you become that cutthroat landlord and that cutthroat capitalist, basically. Yeah,
because you got to win.
Because you want to win at this game that has been going on for 7 fucking hours. So yes. It's weird how much that competitive streak comes out in us. But I'm just wondering now, because I covered this game because I like this story, because I liked it. I thought it was interesting. But does the blame go on one person, or does it go on multiple people? Does it go on the Parker brothers and Charles Darrow? Does it go on Charles Darrow alone? Does it go on the Parker brothers alone? Does some of it go for Elizabeth Mackey and maybe not marketing it right? I don't think you can really give her any score on this, but what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, because she took it to Parker brothers and they said no, right?
Well, I don't know if she took the game. That's the thing. I can't find out if she took that game to Parker brothers. They hired her to do another game initially, which they put out. But the fact of the matter is they would have been aware of it because it was selling. It's a board game that's popular in different parts of the US, and they would have known about it, but there didn't seem to be a deal between them and her for it. So.
Okay. Well, I mean, it depends, because if she was pitching it, or it was being pitched with both of these, and hey, there's a lesson here. Nobody wants to learn a lesson while they're trying to play a game. They want to play a game.
Yeah.
I mean, if she was selling it to a school nowadays, maybe it's all on he plagiarized and was just a WeWork salesman guy that did really good stuff.
Yeah, that's it. He's just a very good salesman who stole someone else's idea and changed it.
Yeah, he put some really brilliant red arrow and go and a pretty light bulbs and stuff that he paid some other dude pennies to do for him. And
yeah, fuck. It's hilarious, honestly, because like you hear that story and you're like, that sounds so unfair. But we have heard that story so many times before. I mentioned Ray Kroc multiple times, but there are so many other versions. You think about Apple and Steve Jobs and like kind of swooping up credit other people's creations and just stuff like that in general. I feel there are a bunch of, from the kind of middle of the 20th century onwards, there's a bunch of examples of people taking pre-existing ideas or pre-existing structures in business and just making it their own and saying that they're the person behind it, when the reality is they've stolen it, at least partially, from someone else. So yeah, and this guy is just one of the first few to really do it on a large scale.
Yeah, this industry, the board game guy version of it, and Ray Kroc's the fast food guy version of it, and I'm sure there's a different industry version of it somewhere else.
Yeah. Adam Newman with WeWork, like that shit existed way before he came up with it. He just put beer tabs and other stuff in there, so. So how do you score this? So do you go with Parker? Yeah, that's the thing, because I mean, the easy one is Charles Darrow, who basically plagiarized and made himself a millionaire from it. But he was also he was given the platform to do that by the Parker brothers, who were fully behind this idea that he invented it, even though it's obvious he didn't.
Yeah, well, see, and this is the thing, is if I'm out there playing games with my friends, they're like, hey, come play this game. And they're like, oh, yeah, and it's fun. Like, we started playing this game, Left, Right, Center. It's a dice game. Okay. And it got popular all over the place. Everybody was playing it all of a sudden. Well, if I took that and made some different colored dice and said I invented the damn game, like, dude, no.
You just ripped someone else off.
You got the game. You started playing the game. Somebody else showed you how to play the game.
Yeah.
And now you're rich off of it. You've got to feel bad about that.
Also, like, this is happening at a time when, like, it's difficult to sue people for ripping off your idea, right? Like, it's in the 1930s, just during the Great Depression. It's really hard to go, motherfucker, that is my idea, and I've got this patent to prove it, and blah, blah, blah. And, like, she couldn't really afford or had the ability to be able to do that, so... Yeah.
And did he ever kick her any money or do anything or buy her dinner or nothing?
$500. That's it. And this guy got millions upon millions, because like 500 million copies of this game have been sold.
Wonder if they ever met. If they ever had words.
I'd like to think she'd fucking fly at him and like claw his fucking eyes out or something. You thieving motherfucker! I gave you hours of entertainment and you just stole it. So yeah, I think.
The biggest problem, the biggest score here is the patent office person that didn't bother to notice that the same exact game came through just a few 100,000 million patents later.
Exactly, yeah. Like, why aren't you checking every patent? Could you imagine how long it would take to file a patent if you had to check every single one? Even with computers. Yeah, you had to do it by hand. It's like, hold on, I'm just going to call the board in the next patent office over, and I'm going to get them to check their next 10,000 patents. And yeah, man. That's why this is like 5 different inventors of a light bulb or whatever. Yeah, exactly. So they get a big score for not doing their job so thoroughly.
Yeah, complacency.
Getting on the fucking... they wouldn't even have had telephones. They'd be on there with the fucking... What is it? The Morse code? Sending a telegram. Can you check and see if we've got any board games? Oh my God.
Oh,
yeah.
I love the absurdity of my scores. You're welcome, everybody.
Yeah. So so that's Monopoly. Are we gonna, so who are we gonna score? The biggest score goes to the Telegraph. What about the Parker brothers, if you had to give them a score? And then we'll move on to Charles Darrow.
Oh, okay. The Parker brothers. They bought up all the rest of the patents and then sued everybody that tried to do. They have to get a big score too, because that's a super dick move. It's like, okay, we're gonna pick this guy to be the dude. And then nobody else can have it, even though everybody else contributed and made it originally.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know how to do scores, but 90 all around.
90 all around. Lizzie, there we go. That feels fair, because there's no, I don't think there's any real argument for this. There's like, it's a clear case of theft, of intellectual property theft, and this woman struggled and made far more of an impact on the world than Charles Darrow, whose only impact is, I stole this idea and I sold it for millions. Because like, again, with Roy Kroc, like, you look at people who can kind of considered geniuses of the business world. Like, usually they have had multiple different impacts on the business world. Like, you might be famous for one big thing, like Bill Gates, Microsoft, but there's other stuff, you know, there's other feathers in that cap. And even, I hate to say it, with Elon Musk, there's other stuff going on. You can say Tesla, but there's SpaceX, there's the Boring Company, there's him buying Twitter and ruining it and all of that stuff. Yeah. So, but then there's people like Charles Darrow and Roy Kroc, whatever his name is, who just have that one thing that they've stolen from someone else, and that's it. That's their only contribution. And that's because they are people who do not have original ideas of their own. So they can't create anything. So,
and on that note, I'm off to go invent chutes and ladders. I'll be back soon.
Yeah, I was while I was doing the research, I found out like all these games like Chutes and Ladders and stuff like that. Some of these games are thousands of years old. Like Snakes and Ladders is fucking old. Like I feel like it was like ancient Rome or something like that. And there's a bunch of games that were around like during the Sumerian, fucking the first civilization. Board games were being played back then. It is crazy how popular they have been because you think of them as like quite modern inventions for the most part, the idea of board games. Like, oh yeah, that was part of the 20th century and 21st century, and that's it. But no, a lot of board games go back tens of thousands of years,
I hadn't thought of that.
It's crazy. You look into you Google the oldest board games, and there's like, I feel like maybe not checkers. I mean, chess is old. Chess is like 800 years old or something like that. But there are other board games that you're like, oh yeah, that's similar to this, and that's, hold on, 4,000 years old or something. It's fucking crazy.
That's wild.
It is really like ancient, like the Chinese dynasties and Sumerian and the Egyptian and ancient Greece and stuff. Like some of these like ancient civilizations have their own board games that were being played by people en masse as well, like in large portions of the world. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, so Charles Darrow and the Parker brothers get solid 90s for basically stealing the idea of Monopoly from the woman who originally created it and then mass marketing it and then denying any responsibility in the theft and any, you know, culpability in paying this person the fair rights. So that's
suing the person that tried to spoof him.
I know, which, come on, like I actually want to get a copy of Anti-Monopoly now. I want to see what that's like, because if there's a version of Monopoly that's like a little bit more parody based, then yeah, I'll play that too. I mean, it sounds a bit like Cards Against Humanity, where it's like constantly taking the piss at the people that are playing the game. Like I will gladly pay that. So that's our show for this week. I had a lot of fun researching Monopoly. I didn't know how fucked up it was. You know,
yeah, it's an interesting story for sure. I enjoy it.
It is. I really liked finding out that this woman who wanted to spread the message that she, you know, there was a different way of doing things out there, was buried by capitalists, and like this story, and it is really fascinating. And again, I feel like this is a Netflix film or a mini series for sure, like possibly of this, because it reminds me a bit of the Westinghouse competition with Edison, the Edison company. Yeah. They were like competing versions of the same thing essentially, and then one wins out. I think it was Westinghouse wins out or something.
Yeah, but that's just because he was electrocuting people.
He was, yeah. It's like, and also an actual like warrior guy. Anyway, so it just the story's fascinating. It's also got a clear villain in Charles Darrow. So I mean, there's no denying it. The guy stole it, and that's all he ever did with his life. So yeah. So if you enjoyed that and you would like to support us financially, so that we don't end up like Elizabeth I've forgotten her name now.
Maggie?
Oh, Maggie. Elizabeth Maggie. Don't let us end up like Elizabeth Maggie. Go over to patreon.com/history's greatest idiots, where you can support us financially and sling some cash, and you'll get your own originally designed prize for signing up, and also an annual gift. You also get behind the scenes footage from our lives that we never put on social media, and also exclusive recordings and access to scripts and a whole bunch of other cool stuff. So that's patreon.com/history's greatest idiots. And if you would like to go over to Instagram, you can follow us on there at history's greatest idiots, and that's the same on YouTube, where you can find all of our videos as well. This will be going out as a podcast probably in a week or so's time, when I will be on holiday. When I get back from holiday, myself and Derek will be doing more recordings, hopefully some exclusive Patreon stuff. And yeah, we need to do that. And I've got a bunch of stuff I want to catch up with you on, just like all the other stuff about me freaking my wife out with Primus music, but all of the other stuff as well. So thank you all very much for tuning in to us. And Derek, would you like to say goodbye, please?
Bye, everybody.
And we'll see you all again very soon. Take care now. Bye.